Chapter 12. Brie looked around the room and smiled. She couldn't believe she had pulled this off in a week. Of course, her father's connections helped. He had made sure several wealthy friends would be in attendance, but the rest had been up to Brie. She had secured the venue and the items for the auction. Quite a few had come from her own closet. Items she had purchased but never worn, but she had secured a few art pieces and expensive jewelry as well. Brie owed a lot of people favors now, but it would be worth it if Jesse showed up. That was the only hitch in her plan. He still wasn't talking to her, so she'd planned a different way to invite him, one she hoped his friends would go along with. Even if they got him there, though, that was only half the battle. Then she had to convince him she was serious.
Miss Carter, do you have a moment to go over the menu for tonight?
Brie turned to the older gentleman who was heading up the catering and nodded. Of course, Pierre. She followed him into the kitchen, where he had plates lined up across the counter.
I thought for an appetizer we would start with a glazed fig topped with mascarpone and wrapped with prosciutto.
He gestured to a small bite-sized square. Brie could just see the hint of the fig and the mascarpone sticking out of the end. She picked it up and took a bite, nodding at the delicate flavors that ignited in her mouth. This is wonderful. What's next?
Next we have a salade niçoise.
Brie took a bite of the colorful salad and gave her approval to it as well.
For the main course, we will have pappardelle with sea urchin and cauliflower.
The dish wasn't as colorful as the salad, but the flavors were all there.
And finally, for dessert, we have mocha pots de crème.
Brie smiled at the tiny cups filled with chocolate. She dipped the delicate spoon in and savored the taste. It took great effort to return the spoon and not eat the entire dessert. This is fantastic, Pierre. They will love everything. He nodded.
I am so glad you approve. We will have everything ready to be served at 6, no?
Yes, the appetizers should start at 6. I'd like to be eating the main course at 7, so there is plenty of time for the auction.
As you wish, Miss Carter. I wish you the best of luck with your endeavor tonight.
Brie thanked him before heading out of the kitchen. She would need luck, but she'd need much more than that. A miracle was more like it.
What's going on with you, man? You have been quieter and moodier than normal.
Patrick shut the door to the office and turned to face Jesse. Jesse sighed as he regarded the team leader and tried to decide how much to tell him. He didn't want to admit a girl was messing up his game, but he needed to assure Patrick he could still do his job. The fact that Patrick had called this meeting in his office told Jesse that Patrick needed some reassurance. He jammed his hands in his pockets and took a deep breath.
It's Brie. I found out she only pursued me because of a bet.
Patrick leaned back against his desk and crossed his arms.
That doesn't sound like the girl I've gotten to know.
Patrick hadn't been around Brie all that often, but she had stopped in a few times over the last couple of weeks with lunch or dinner for the guys.
Are you sure there isn't more to the story?
Jesse shrugged and plopped down in one of the open chairs.
She said she called it off the first week when she started to fall for me. But I don't know. How can I be with a girl who lied to me? I'm not saying she was right, but she wasn't exactly lying to you. She just didn't offer up the information. And this is probably why. She probably thought if she told you that she would lose you. Yeah, but how do I trust her going forward? I'll always wonder if her feelings are real. Don't they teach you at that church of yours about forgiveness? It sounds like Brie made a mistake, and she is asking you for forgiveness. Or else she made up the part about calling off the bet, and as soon as I propose, she'll dump me.
Patrick's brow inched up, creating tiny creases across his forehead.
Were you going to propose? Not yet, but I was falling for this one, Patrick. She was so different from what I had thought she was. I think she still is. Yes, she made a mistake making a bet like that, but look at it this way. If she hadn't, you two might never have met."
Jesse leaned back in the chair and ran his hand across his stubbled chin. He hadn't thought about it that way. He believed God put people in his path for a purpose. Maybe his purpose had been to ground Brie, and hers had been to get him to open up again. Still, that didn't make trusting her any easier. He was about to say so when the phone on Patrick's desk rang. Patrick held up a finger and circled the desk to answer the phone.
"Sergeant Hughes."
There was a pause, and his eyes flicked to Jesse before returning to the phone.
"Yes, he's here. Hold on."
Patrick punched the hold button on the phone and faced Jesse.
"You have anything going on tonight?"
Jesse shook his head. Now that he was no longer seeing Brie, his evenings were empty once again.
"Yes, sir. We'll be there."
Patrick hung up the phone and stared at it a moment.
"That was Mark Avery, head of the Children's Hospital. I guess you are being recognized at some banquet tonight, and we're all invited."
"What? I don't know anything about a banquet."
"Yeah, he apologized for the late notice, said it was set up out of the blue by a generous donor. Guess we better go tell the guys to dust off their dress uniforms."
Jesse nodded, but his mind was a million miles away. What was this surprise banquet? Would he have to give a speech? He hated giving speeches, as he'd never been good at it. And this was even more nerve-wracking as he had no idea what it would be about.
"All right, guys, listen up. Jesse here is a guest of honor at a banquet tonight, and we have all been invited. So go home, clean up, and be back here at 1700 in your dress uniforms."
He looked to Carter.
"Spotless and pressed."
Carter balked.
"What are you looking at me for? I am always spotless and pressed." "If you have a wife and can find a sitter, your wife is also invited. If you are single, do not bring a date." "What? How is that fair?" Brendan argued. "I finally get invited someplace fancy and I can't even show off." "I'm sorry, those were the stipulations," Patrick said.
Jared laughed and clapped a hand on Brendan's shoulder.
"Guess the old ball and chain isn't so bad after all, huh?"
Brendan returned a jab, and Jesse took the opportunity to slip out and grab his things. He didn't want any of the guys asking him questions when he had so many himself, and no answers. Jesse arrived back at the station with 5 minutes to spare. He felt stiff in his dress uniform. This would be his first time wearing it. "Well, don't you look nice?" Penny said as he entered.
"Thank you. I feel a little like a wooden soldier." "You should have stretched it out more like I did with mine," Brendan said as he entered the foyer. "I put mine on once a week just to see how good I look." "Ha! You probably put it on every day," Carter said. He had entered just behind Brendan. Patrick showed up next, minus his wife due to her very pregnant state, but Cam and Jared both entered with their wives on their arms. "We all here then?" Patrick asked, looking around the room. "Good. You all look nice, and our ride should be here." He looked out the front door. "Right now." Jesse turned to see a black stretch limo in front of the station. Brendan let out a low whistle. "Wow, we get to ride in style." "Hey, what's with the limo?" Jesse asked Patrick as the rest of the group filed out. Patrick shook his head. "Just part of the package. You've made quite an impression on someone." So it would seem. The question Jesse had was who? Who had he impressed so much that all of this would be offered to him? He climbed in the limo, curious as to what the next few hours would hold.